hours.
So we mentioned earlier that you and I have both spent a little bit of time in consulting, and the pressures were the same for billable hours in consulting. And
Yes.
the way I saw consulting firms deal with that was they would set up internal projects against which your best minds would be able to bill. And those would be still effectively, per practice, they would still be billable hours, but for the organization as a whole, that's how you get your innovation. And does that not happen in law
It is
firms?
happening.
Right.
And there's a lot of lip service being paid to giving people certain types of, additional roles or hats that they're wearing where, it will make them look good, right? To be able to say, oh, I'm part of this working group. I'm part of this, special committee that's looking at X, Y, and Z. What tends to happen, and I'm afraid it really is still a ubiquitous problem at the moment, is that there is just an awful lot of talking shops around excessive loops around talking about the same thing, and a real lack of rigor around, what are we, even just basics around what problem are we trying to solve? What are the goals that we're setting for ourselves in an iterative way? Like, how can we actually be a little bit agile around this? Because we may set a target for ourselves. You can't deal in like yearly targets anymore. You have to be able to have a broad compass of where you're strategically going. But then it may be that things shift and change. Even that concept is quite different. But even just from meeting to meeting, being able to identify, well, what are we actually focusing on? What do we need to receive? What do we need to achieve as the output from this particular meeting? And how is it then going to serve our OKRs? Again, another foreign concept. It's that level is very, very difficult. So to get any kind of real movement happening, the momentum is just incredibly hard to happen. And also, well, the difference between the Big Four and law firms is that I think, just speaking from personal experience, they did actually put quite a lot of impetus and onus on if you were able to really contribute to the development of a point of view, the organization, and Big Four is, making a big they're trying to actually productize their point of view in relation to the latest trends or whatever. And then they seek to publish that. They give you a name for it. They put it in the limelight. You can then go do speeches, and you can go and talk to others around it. You get some internal kudos around it, and you're really engaged in trying to stay up to date. And it really does actually add to your image and your promotion likelihood of your
Prospects,
promotion. Prospect. And it is to some degree commodified in terms of what percentage of your time needs to be spent on that. And they're actually measuring it, and it is seen as a really important part of your job. What I've seen in law firms, and even the more innovative ones, is that actually there's a bit of lip service put to it, but there's no true metric put on how do you quantify if you're spending too much time on that and you're not meeting your billable hour, the daily amount of time, daily targets around how many billable hours you're clocking, that is still the primary metric. And any other stuff that you're doing is just a nice to have, to be really honest, within the world of law. And so until there's a shift in truly freeing up some time for lawyers, I just don't see that level of really innovative engagement happening. Because what we need is the best minds, the ones who are the most successful with clients, who are able to bring in the best revenue. We actually need them to be putting their minds to internal processes and new ways of working and new ways of interacting with technology.
Absolutely. So I'm sure at some point we will come on to the types of use cases and the types of technologies that we could be using against the culture of innovation and a culture of using artificial intelligence. But one eye on the clock, right?
Yeah.
Let's think about what we've spoken about so far is the prevailing culture in the legal sector that potentially allows those who are hungry enough, because work is competitive, right? And some people do things, others don't do those things, and the people who do those things sometimes get ahead because they're hungry for it. So work is competitive. Now, in this backdrop of fairly vertical hierarchies, large power distance and power dynamics, and always you have the new generation coming in, whether that's people who've come from other careers or whether it's people who are graduates coming in. Age is not really a factor here. People are coming in using new tools, new technologies to try and change things, improve things, and potentially give more value to the client for less resource input, because that's really the goal of everything. So when we think about all of that in this kind of culture where, of course, it's the legal sector, we must be thinking about regulatory governance in there as well. Cobbler's children shouldn't have to wear shoes and all of this kind of thing. So we think about all of that. And regardless of the types of technology, which we'll come on to at a later date, but are there key messages or key things that you would like to, if you could unlock one door and suddenly the world of law and artificial intelligence would come together seamlessly into some kind of utopia. If you could unlock that one door or three doors, what would they be?
I think about some real practical examples of what has worked for me and has given me the greatest sense of efficacy and ability to really make some impact. It's where you get someone at the top who's already quite powerful in the world that they're in, and they're willing to put their neck on the line and actually really innovate and really try new things. And I have seen that. What it requires and what has happened has been this ability to think through, okay, how am I engaging across my organization with a cross-functional way? So, and that starts with relationships. That starts with that leader having just a straight up one-to-one conversation, but ideally involving some people in the background like myself. I would get involved in these discussions where you're really trying to map out the relationship. First of all, you're trying to talk through the purpose of what you're trying to do in sort of, I'm going to use a really terrible term here, but supercharge the collaboration between certain functions and different practice areas. You're getting that relationship right at the top, the buy-in right at the top. You're building trust right at the top. And then you're asking for those other leaders to provide you with a delegated person who they trust to be their sort of operational or project lead on a particular angle that you're trying to really create innovation around. This is basic stuff. This is not rocket science. This is about relationships. So that's the very key. That's the very start, and having delegated power structures and communication channels that are set for specific purposes. And then that there's a way of monitoring the progress of how that relationship actually works. And there it comes into the world of OKRs and how to actually start to look at what is our strategy? What exactly are we trying to achieve? What are the primary sort of priority areas for us? Let's not boil the ocean. Let's not throw the kitchen sink at it. Let's focus on doing one thing well, and then iterating and then moving on to the next thing and doing and using that, creating a success story to then create something new in the next realm. And so there tends to be this, and I did start to see that happening in certain spaces where, this real understanding of excellent strategic execution and what that looks like was starting to make a difference. So I don't know if that gives you a little bit of a flavor. It's all to do with, the people side of strategic execution and beginning to involve people from the bottom up as well as from the top down at the same time.
And I think that tracks with a lot of the things that I see across learning and development and across human capital management, where, stakeholder management, identifying the drivers for the business and having that stakeholder influence is very important. But at the same time, having a purposeful portfolio of technology implementations that address business problems and can be piloted and then dropped, fail fast, if they don't work, such that you eventually you sharpen what you're doing and start to add value to the business. That message seems to be consistent across industries, regardless of where we are.
It is, and we just need the ability to. What I would say is what I've seen is the ability. So certain law firms have in the past tried to put quite a lot of money into innovation programs, but what has happened is that there has been a reluctance to drop that program when it's not proving to actually, have returns. And that is one of the key factors. I'm massively, I'm a huge follower of Annie Duke and, understanding more about the science of decision making and, how do we make decisions about when to quit, the sunk cost fallacy and all of that. There's a huge barrier for law firms in particular, because there is this very strong assumption, if we've put a lot of money into something, we just have to make it work, right? We just have to make it work. We will bash it on the head until it works. And then only when somebody very brave comes along, and raises the right questions, do you eventually get a decision to call it quits on something, so that you can then start something new. This is a big mindset shift. The small experimentation of things in small pockets and the ability to fail fast and say, okay, this is not working, let's move on to the next thing. That is a whole new world for law firms, and it definitely needs to become much more practical.
Absolutely. So, Jacqui Woodall, thank you very much for today's conversation.
It's my pleasure.
Hopefully we will have another conversation on use cases and culture and skills at some point in the future. But for today, thank you very much.
Great to be here. Thanks.